Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960 AM News Talk Radio. We're on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock. And tonight we're going to have an interesting conversation with Paul Lem, who is the CEO of Spartan BioScience, Inc. Paul's got a fascinating COVID-19 test kit that is currently in front of Health Canada for approval, and I think he's going to tell us a little bit about it. So, Paul, welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. How are you?
Hi, Brian. Thanks for having me on your show. I'm doing great, thanks.
Excellent. Well, it's great to have you here. So tell us about this product that's got this far faster turnaround for COVID-19 testing, if you could.
So this is the world's smallest DNA analyzer. And the way it works is you take a swab, put the swab into the testing cartridge, the cartridge in the device, and then for COVID-19, you'll have your results in about 30 minutes.
Fantastic. And this is, you're testing a swab from the throat, just like these current swabs are being done?
Exactly.
And by testing for DNA, are you testing something different than the typical tests they're doing?
It's the same type of test. So as you said, the swab can either be a throat swab or a swab in your nose. And then the test is actually the CDC's published and validated COVID-19 test.
And so what's the secret here? It's the fact that it's in a handheld small unit that reads the DNA. Is that what the secret is?
That's right, because the way COVID-19 testing currently works is you got to take that swab and ship it off to a lab in a big city like Toronto. But with our device, you can actually run it wherever you want and get the instant results without having to ship away swabs.
And how many swabs can your unit test?
I test one at a time. So think of it like a blood glucose meter.
Right.
So with a blood glucose meter, you have your device and your test strips. Whereas before, it used to be you had to collect blood, send off to a lab, and wait days or weeks to get your blood glucose results.
So I understand it does one at a time, but then can the unit test another swab later on, or no, you throw it away and you start with a whole other unit?
No, so think of it like a Sony PlayStation. So once you have the game console, then you can put different game cartridges in. So it's the same sort of thing. It's always the same device, and then you use these single-use disposable cartridges.
So single-use cartridges, single-use swabs, but a PlayStation or a testing unit that you can use multiple times. That's
right. Another analogy I'm using is like a Keurig coffee machine. You got your Keurig coffee machine and use those little pods every time you want a cup of coffee.
Okay, fantastic. Well, it sounds like an incredible innovation. You're currently where in the regulatory approval process?
So we're talking with Health Canada almost every day, and it's what's called a rolling submission. So as we generate performance data, we're sending it to Health Canada. So we're anticipating approval within a few weeks, and then we'll start shipping our first product.
Now, you know, we've heard on President Trump's FDA White House press briefings that the FDA are approving things overnight. How come we can't get Health Canada to approve it more quickly?
So it's a slightly more bureaucratic process here in Health Canada. We actually have to submit this performance data. The way it works in the States is you can actually just generate the data internally and then start selling while you wait the 15 days for the FDA to approve it.
And have we got some understanding about why Health Canada's got this more bureaucratic process in Canada?
I think this is the fastest process they were able to put in place. So that's what has to be followed.
How many people have you tested so far?
We're actually testing all sorts of people in our lab right now as we actually test the CDC's COVID-19 test on our device.
And whereabouts are you located?
We're here in Ottawa, Canada.
And in Canada or Orleans or whereabouts?
We're actually very close to the IKEA, so near Baseline Road and Pinecrest.
Fantastic. And how long has your company been around?
We've been around for 14 years.
And what other kinds of products have you been developing?
So our other products include something called a precision medicine test for heart attack patients. So it tells cardiologists which drug will work best for a heart attack patient. Another one of our tests is this environmental water safety test for a bacteria called Legionella. It causes something called Legionnaire's disease, a severe pneumonia. So this Legionella bacteria can contaminate water systems in buildings.
Legionnaire's disease?
So Legionnaire's disease, most people don't realize it actually infects several 100,000 people in the US every year, causes this severe pneumonia, and then about 10% of people die. So we probably have 10, 20,000 people dying of Legionnaire's disease every year. And it's totally preventable, because if you're not in a building with a water system contaminated with Legionella, then you don't get Legionnaire's disease.
Unbelievable. And so you obviously have both manufacturing capability to get up and running and manufacture these units, and you've proven with Health Canada and other people that you know what you're talking about, and you can provide good scientific devices. How long have you been working on this COVID-19 testing unit?
So my background is I'm an infectious disease doctor, and I also had a specialty in microbiology. So I've been monitoring the COVID-19 pandemic around the world for several months. So for several weeks now, the team has actually been working on taking the CDC's COVID-19 test and putting it onto our device.
And so, sorry, this device is a device that you use for some of your other disease testing as well?
Exactly. So this is the same device that we use for a number of other of our tests. Like I mentioned, that Legionella test. So some of our customers for that test are the CDC, New York State Department of Health. So in these Legionnaires outbreaks that happen across the US, the CDC actually brings this device on site and tests the water in buildings.
Fantastic. Well, it sounds like we're waiting with bated breath across not only Canada, but the world for your device to get approved. Now, what's the status of approval outside of Canada?
So after we get Health Canada approval, that's where we'll look to get FDA approval. But right now we're focused wholly on Canada. I mean, there's so much demand for our test from outside of Canada, like other countries, other corporations. But what we want to do is we want to prioritize Canada first because we're proudly Canadian. And we've heard from our customers that other countries are actually locking down the supply of their domestic manufacturers of diagnostic kits. So we want to make sure that Canada gets access to our supply.
Have you had an indication that Health Canada or someone in the Canadian government wants to lock you down and secure 100% of your supply?
For sure. Well, that's why I think Premier Doug Ford announced that Ontario has purchased 900,000 of our tests. Alberta announced that they purchased 100,000 of our tests and 100 analyzers. And the federal government, Justin Trudeau, also announced, I think a few days ago, that the government has also put a purchase order into us.
So that must do a little bit of good for your bottom line.
Yeah, I think it's more, we're happy that we can actually help Canada at this time because, again, we're hearing from customers that like the United States and Europe, they're actually preventing exports of their essential medical supplies like DNA diagnostic kits. So I think it's good that we're here in Canada. We actually manufacture here in Ottawa. And so we'll make sure that Canada has access to our supply.
Well, we're going to take a break for messages and come back for a little bit more on Spartan BioScience. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Dr. Paul Lamb, who is the CEO of Spartan BioScience, Inc., a company that has developed a COVID-19 testing device. And Dr. Lamb, you had said that you're an infectious disease expert?
That's right. So I have my medical degree and my specialty was infectious disease and microbiology.
And so you obviously have been following COVID-19 and the coronavirus closely. You know, you've seen these, undoubtedly, these graphs of projections in the United States. I understand that we're going to get these projections for Ontario and Canada soon that go in the United States from 100,000 to 200,000 potential deaths. Do you agree with those?
So this virus is extremely scary. I think one of the scariest parts is the CDC has reported that about 25% of people who are infected with COVID-19 show no symptoms. So they're walking around in the neighborhood, walking past me and you, and they're actually infectious. And that's how so many people get infected. So this virus is exponentially increasing.
So there was an article in the Ottawa Citizen, I guess a week ago, that said at the time there were only 49 confirmed cases in Ottawa, but the head of infectious control was suggesting he thought there were 4,000 people that actually were infected in Ottawa because, number one, it was a couple of days late, if not a week late, in getting the test results. And number two, because of that time frame, that initial 49 had gone through several generations of transmission to others. And so he said, our numbers aren't 10 times wrong, they're 100 times wrong.
That's right. So you look at places, let's say like South Korea or New York City or Italy, it took a while before they realized the scale of the problem. And to bring it under control, that's where testing comes into place. South Korea, one of the big reasons they got it under control was because they were testing people all the time.
And you know, clearly there's been a lot of complaints in the United States about lack of testing, but we've had lack of testing in Canada as well. You know, I've had friends that have waited a week and they still haven't got their test results back. What is this about the testing, you know, capacity and length of time to get results that's caused this massive delay?
So right now, the way a test works is you got to take that swab and you have to ship it to a place like Toronto where they have these mainframe DNA analyzers and highly trained people who can run these machines. And so that's why it takes so long, because then they have to report the results back to you. So that's where I think something like a portable DNA analyzer all over the place that will help relieve the burden on not having to send these swabs to the big cities.
No question. And so do you see that, like these drive-through testing sites that they've got in the United States? I haven't actually seen the drive-through ones in Canada yet, but that each one of those drive-through lanes would have one of your portable units?
I think that could be a really good application. So look at drive-through lanes, doctors' offices, pharmacies, smaller towns, smaller hospitals. I think it could be deployed all of those places.
And then how long to get the results?
So you get your results in around 30 minutes.
In around 30 minutes. And can you use the unit during that 30-minute time period?
No, it runs one sample at a time. So like a blood glucose meter, once it's running, it has to finish the run.
Okay, so you wouldn't be able to actually have a lineup that you would go. You would have, I presume, a couple of units, and then what would be your sense that you would call people back, or people would hang around for the half hour to wait to see what the results are?
Good question. I think both things could work. People could hang around for 30 minutes and shop in the pharmacy, or you can call people back.
So you're a couple of weeks away from getting approval. Are you spec manufacturing the units right now?
Yeah, exactly. That's right. So we're taking the CDC's COVID-19 test. So we know the test works because it's already published and validated. And we're putting it onto our device where we've been selling it for years and years. And our technology has been approved by regulatory authorities around the world, like the FDA and Health Canada. So we're already building the devices, we're building the swabs, we're building the cartridges.
Okay, so I'm a simple kind of guy, though I have worked in the pharmaceutical business previously. You've got a test that is approved and that you're using the exact same test, and you've got equipment that's been approved that you're using, and all you're doing is combining the two together, and it's going to take a couple of weeks to still get approval?
That's right, because you have to do all sorts of performance data to show that even though it's already an approved test, even though it's already an approved device, when you put the two together, you have to prove that it works.
It seems a little bit in this emergency that we're still sticking by those kinds of criteria myself. Couldn't you do like, a test of a couple of hundred people over the course of 48 hours and prove that it works?
Yes, and that's also where, so that's part of it. And then you also have to do all sorts of other quality control measures. You got to actually change the software on the user interface. So there's all these things that people don't often realize goes into before you ship a product.
Well, I wish you luck in that regard. Okay, so let's go back to COVID-19 then. So you agree that these kind of projections that we've seen in the United States are possible. Have you got any idea what that would mean for Ontario or Canada?
Well, I've seen estimates where it could be 25%, 50% of the population eventually gets infected with COVID-19. And I think there's projections where it's something like maybe 5% of people will need to be admitted to the hospital, maybe 1% of people will actually die. So those are pretty scary statistics. Like, can you imagine if 1 out of every 100 people who gets infected dies? That's hundreds of thousands of people potentially.
Yeah.
So that's where my medical colleagues who are in the healthcare system, everyone's bracing themselves for example, what's happening in New York City.
Well, if you apply the sort of the 10%, because we're sort of 30 million versus their 350 million or something like that, so we're 1/10 the size. So the 100,000 to 200,000 that they would have would translate to 10,000 to 20,000 for us. That actually sounds lower than the kind of number that you're talking about.
That's 100,000 cases they have right now that have been diagnosed. But if you believe that, let's say, half of the US is going to get infected, that's 150 million people. So if you look at 1% of those are going to die, that's like potentially 1 million people. So
okay. So you're saying that this 100,000 to 200,000 potential deaths in the United States that the president of the United States had a graph about just a couple of days ago, you're thinking might be wrong by an order of 10, that it could actually be 1.5 million people that die in the United States.
Right. That's where I think President Trump, if I recall, he said it'd be a big win if only 100,000 to 200,000 people die, but it could be more like 1 million people die.
Well, that's pretty shocking. So that the article that he quoted, I went and actually read by this infectious disease expert at the University of Washington, and he actually had a projection that went from 30-something thousand to 240,000. And that was what was used by the president to say the 100,000 to 200,000 number. But nowhere in that paper was a suggestion of 1 million or 1.5 million. Like that's an astounding number. But what you're saying is 1% mortality of half of the population getting infected.
So this is where no one really knows, like, what is the mortality rate? It could be 1%, could be less, could be more. I think in Italy, it's actually much higher than 1%. So,
but are we getting to 50% of the population being infected, or we don't know that either yet?
Well, I think if you look at New York City, it's probably getting there. Right? If you look at Italy, it's getting there.
And so what you're saying is South Korea obviously was able to flatten the curve, and you've undoubtedly seen the same graphs that I've seen that show that South Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong, all very dense urban environments, and people have been criticizing, saying dense urban environments are the worst places for this. They've done an incredibly good job of flattening the curve and stemming the infection rate. How have they done that? They've done that with testing?
I think testing has been a huge part of how they've been able to flatten the curve. So you look at South Korea, they mobilized their domestic makers of these test kits. They immediately started testing all sorts of people. And then when people were tested positive, they actually had teams that would trace who that person came in contact with. And then all those people went into isolation.
And yet, if we've got most of the country in isolation in social distancing anyway, aren't we actually accomplishing that already, or do you still think the testing needs to be done?
Well, I think it needs to be a combination of both social distancing and testing, because you can even walk around in your neighborhood. I think you see people, even though they're social distancing, they still aren't. So it's a multi-pronged approach.
And so, I think that what happened in China and in Singapore is, people were given apps that tracked exactly where they went. Some of them, actually had bracelets put on them, GPS bracelets. And so the enforcement of social distancing or social isolation was far more, I don't know what the right word is, profound, compelling than what we're considering. In South Korea, they had drones that were flying up and down streets with broadcasts telling people if they were collecting together to disperse and go home, and were surveilling and taking pictures of people that would end up being reported. Like, are you suggesting we kind of need that level of state intrusion in our lives?
That's a good question, Brian. I don't know if those of us here in the West who are used to liberty and freedoms and privacy would put up with that sort of thing. And I think that's why governments here have been reluctant to do that sort of thing.
But because of that reluctance, we're going to end up having a lot more infection and probably a lot more deaths.
It could very well be. And this is where hopefully more testing can help alleviate that.
It's interesting. I interviewed Diane Francis, columnist with the National Post, who is thought of as typically a reasonably right-wing conservative commentator. And she was arguing that we needed to follow the South Korean kind of methodology. Otherwise, she said that we are going to have exactly what you're describing as she didn't say 1 million deaths, but certainly a couple 100,000 deaths. And she used as an example the bubonic plague in the Middle Ages, where if you and/or anyone in your household was infected and you left the house, you had to carry a pole with hay on the top so that everyone knew that you were a potential carrier and they would stay far away.
Yeah, it's a good question. How extreme are the measures going to have to be to actually bring this pandemic under control? I mean, already it looks like the economy is basically frozen. I mean, if I walk outside my neighborhood, everything is shut down. And that's obviously inflicting huge economic pain on people. How many people are out of work now? Yeah. It's pretty crazy.
So how do you, you're a business person as well as a scientist, how do you play the health impact versus the economic impact? Because, certainly Donald Trump was talking about that just, I guess, a week ago, where he was almost suggesting that the social isolation, the shutting down the country was too high a price to pay to destroy the economy, and that we should let people get back to work. Now, seems like he's changed his mind in that regard, but that was a tune he was singing for a while.
It's a really difficult question and answer. I do think that when people see how many, for example, older people are dying in seniors' homes, there was that home in Bob Cajun. I think people are realizing this is serious. That if we don't do the social distancing, if we don't take at least a short-term hit to our economy, there's a lot of people who are going to die.
Well, this is a sobering conversation. We're going to take a break for a message and come back more with the doctor in just a second. Stay with us. Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960 AM. We're chatting tonight with Dr. Paul Lem, who is the CEO of Spartan BioScience Inc., an Ottawa-based you're not really a biotech, you're sort of a medical device testing company, I would presume, who's an infectious disease expert, and they've developed a testing product, DNA testing product that you've been kind enough to show us before. Why don't you show it to us again if you've got it handy? That tests COVID-19, and he's got some orders from Ontario and Alberta and the federal government, and he's waiting for his Health Canada approval. Doctor, tell me, how'd you get into this business? You said you were an infectious disease expert, but you obviously didn't want to stay in medicine. You wanted to get into building equipment, I guess.
So I'm a medical doctor by training, and then I started my residency in infectious disease. And the reason I got into medicine is I always wanted to be an inventor. I wanted to invent things that would help other people. And I realized that by being a doctor, I might be able to see maybe 10,000, 20,000 patients in my life over my career. But if I became a medical device entrepreneur and my products were successful, it could potentially help millions of people around the world. Now I think we're getting to that point where after 20 years of being a biotech entrepreneur, finally getting to see that dream fulfilled.
And so how, you said Spartan BioScience is, you said 12 years old?
14 years.
14 years old. And so you've been at it for 14 years. And what are the products you've launched so far again?
So some of our products, one is what we call a precision medicine test for heart attack patients. So your DNA is different from my DNA. But as a doctor, I still write the same prescription for you and everyone else. But since the Human Genome Project, we know that that's not actually the right thing to do. That I should actually be running a DNA test on you and then personalizing the prescription to you. So there's this drug, it's called Plavix. It's the #2 best-selling drug after Lipitor. And it's commonly given to cardiac stent patients. So we have this test that cardiologists use to figure out, are you one of the people that Plavix will actually work for, or should you get different drugs?
Right. And then what else? You've got another one you said for, was it Legionnaire's disease?
That's right. It's for Legionella bacterial contamination of water systems. So for example, the air conditioning system of large office buildings can get contaminated with those Legionella bacteria. And the water vapor that comes off in the building, if you breathe it in, you can get Legionnaire's disease.
And do both of those products use the same unit that you have in your hand?
So this portable DNA analyzer, we have European approval for our precision medicine test. We went to apply for FDA approval in the United States and also Health Canada approval. And then our Legionella test, yes, it also uses this portable DNA analyzer.
And so all of your tests are analyzing DNA?
That's right.
Excellent. And you're a private or public company?
We're a private company.
And so you've been able to get the appropriate funding private. You haven't had to go public to get the resources you need so far?
Yeah, we've raised money from angel investors and also from strategic investors like Canon. So Canon is the leader in cameras and copiers.
Canon copiers want to invest in your equipment. That's interesting.
Yeah, Canon told us that they were originally founded by an obstetrician gynecologist, and he wanted to make medical diagnostic equipment. But it turned out it was his cameras that started selling first. So then that's how they got into the camera business. They've always wanted to get back into the medical diagnostic business.
And maybe you were the way to do it. Well, that's fascinating. And when did you first become aware of the coronavirus and decide that you needed to develop a test for it?
Because of my infectious disease background, I've been tracking the COVID-19 pandemic for a few months now. And then it was several weeks ago that we realized we really need to start working on a test. And
so when you say several weeks ago, when was that?
Yeah, it was maybe 3-4 weeks ago.
Oh, so just a short time.
Yeah, just a short time. And the advantage is we decided not to reinvent the wheel, so we didn't have to invent our own test. We then were able to just take the CDC's published and validated COVID-19 test and just put it onto our device.
Now, is that, we've heard a lot about these high throughput tests in the United States that different LabCorp and other companies have developed. Is that the same CDC approved test or is it a different test?
I think most diagnostic manufacturers and testing labs are using the CDC's test.
I've heard of people that are talking about blood tests and other potential tests for COVID-19. Are they things that you think have got an opportunity as well, or no, the CDC swab test is the best?
Potentially. So those are a different type of tests. They're called antigen tests or serology tests. Basically, a test to see if you have antibodies that you created in your bloodstream because you've been infected with COVID-19 and successfully fought it off. The problem is it's not a diagnostic test. It only tells you what happened in the past. Like, were you infected at one time? What you really need as a diagnostic test is, are you infected right now and are you contagious to other people?
But we are going to need that the blood test because if we ever get to a sort of what's it called herd immunity, we're going to have to know whether we've had enough people that have actually developed immunity, aren't we not?
Hmm. That's as long as the COVID-19 virus doesn't mutate or different strains of coronavirus cause the same pandemic. That's why there's no serology tests for, let's say, the flu that are actually that useful. Because every flu season, it's some new strain of flu. So if you just ran a serology test for last season's flu strain, it wouldn't really be of any use for this season's flu strain.
So what's your sense? Is that that we will develop immunity, herd immunity, or we will not, and we are going to get these second and third waves?
Well, I think there will be some herd immunity to COVID-19. What I'm concerned about is what happens if there's other coronavirus strains that come out, like something, if COVID-19 mutates a bit, and then the herd is no longer immune.
So you've heard, some of these people talk about let's go out and get infected if we're young because we're not gonna die. Just stay away from old and vulnerable people. But then once we're infected and we recover, then we can go out and go back to work and go through our daily lives because we're not going to end up being able to be infected and or infect other people. Is there any truth to that idea?
I think that's pretty concerning that people think that way. So for two reasons. One is, even if a person's young and healthy, there's still a percentage of those people who end up in the ICU and also end up dying. Like, I actually know one of my friends, he actually had COVID-19 and he actually had to call 911 because he thought he wasn't going to be able to breathe anymore. So first of all, it is dangerous even for young people.
Right.
The second thing is, when even younger people, even if you don't get severely ill, you then have the potential to spread it to your loved ones. Let's say like your grandparents or your parents if they're older. I don't think anyone wants to be potentially killing their parents or grandparents.
No question. But if you're right that 40 to 50% of the population are actually going to get it, is it better to get it early or better to get it late? You certainly don't want to get it in the middle at the peak.
Right, exactly. Well, this is why hopefully we can flatten the curve so that when people do get it, there's actually enough hospital beds and enough ventilators so that everyone will be able to be treated and not die.
So you're working on obviously this DNA test. Are you working on any other COVID-19 tests or pieces of equipment, or you're not producing ventilators, obviously?
No. Our core expertise is we make these portable DNA analyzers, and we're working on this COVID-19 test.
Do you think there's any opportunity for you to get involved in this blood testing, or is that a completely different technology?
It's a completely different technology that we don't work in.
And are there other companies that are working on that in Canada, as far as you know?
As far as I know, we are Canada's only portable DNA analyzer company.
You're the only portable DNA analyzer company. Are there portable DNA analyzer companies in the United States?
I think there's about 5 of us portable DNA analyzer companies around the world that have regulatory approvals.
And are they similarly going after COVID-19 approvals?
That's right. So all of us, because of the huge public health crisis, all of us companies are going after that.
Well, good luck. I think it sounds like a fantastic business opportunity for you, but far more, frankly, important. It's a huge health opportunity for Canada and for the world. This is going to have to be a massive manufacturing undertaking for you. Do you have your own manufacturing capability?
We do. So we manufacture here in Ottawa our cartridges and our swabs. So we're massively scaling that up. It was about a week and a half ago that Prime Minister Trudeau announced a letter of intent with our company, and since then we've been spending millions of dollars on our supply chain.
And have you got a facility, or have you had to add on facilities?
So we have our 18,000 square foot manufacturing facility in Canada. So we've been ramping that up, but in addition, in parallel, we've been looking to add other facilities
In the Ottawa area.
That's right.
And are these facilities that have got to be air pressure locked and things like this? So they're pharmaceutical grade kind of manufacturing?
It's not to that level, but we do put clean rooms in there, and then we have these manufacturing lines that we have to install.
Well, it's a unbelievable undertaking that you're targeting toward. There's no question. Have you made projections about if this actually gets to 50% of the Canadian population? So we're ended up talking about 15, 17 million people. How many of those people have to be tested? Like 100% of them?
Good question. So that's why we are ramping up to be able to create millions of these tests per year. And I think a combination
But
of
millions per year doesn't enough. Like we need like 15 million in 6 months.
that's right. That's where the mainframe DNA analyzers also come into play. So I think a majority of Canadians actually live in the dense urban centers. So I think they will be best served with the mainframe DNA analyzers. And then it's outside of the major urban centers, that's where we come in.
But also you're going to come in where people want to get the quick result, because as you say, the mainframe analyzers take a couple of days, if not a week, to get the results back.
That's right. So I think we'll work together, mainframes and portable DNA analyzers.
So are you getting the appropriate support from the Government of Canada and from Health Canada?
The government and Health Canada have been phenomenal. I think they understand the scale of this public health crisis. They've been moving very quickly to actually get us the resources that we need.
So we've heard, so much criticism, not necessarily in Canada, but in the United States, about how quickly or how non-quickly people have been able to ramp up the acquisition of tests or the approval of new tests and things like that. What was it? People just weren't watching what was happening in China and Asia and South Korea, or we were hoping it wasn't going to happen here, or what's your assessment? If you're an infectious disease expert, and I've got a friend of mine who has been on my show a couple of times now, who's the head of infectious disease at UHN. We were doing programs in January about what was coming. What happened? Are we just flat-footed? Are we just wishing things away?
Yeah, I've generally observed people have a hard time wrapping their head around mathematical concepts like exponential growth. Because it's easy to hear, oh, there's just a few cases, but they don't realize that when those cases double like every few days, very quickly that means that could be hundreds of thousands of people infected. And so that's where I think, let's say New York City got flat-footed, they just didn't realize what exponential spread meant.
Well, it was interesting because I had a gentleman explain it to me. He said that on average, this disease has been infecting 2.6. Every individual infects 2.6 people, so it's more than a doubling. But that doubling occurs every half a day, and so 10 generations of the infection would occur in 5 days. And if you work through the math of one person infecting 2.6 people, and then each one of those 2.6 people in 12 hours infect another 2.6 people, and then in another 12 hours, another 2.6 people, the math works out to one person infects 4,400 people in 5 days.
Right, and you see how you had to work through the math because it's not intuitive to us as human beings. We don't realize, oh, like one person infects 2.6 people. It seems pretty small. When you actually do the math, you realize it's a staggering number in a very short period of time.
Well, you're an expert at this. Have you ever seen anything like this before in your experience?
Not in my experience, but I know in the infectious disease world, we often have talked about for years that humanity was overdue for a pandemic. If you look through human history, it's every 50 to 100 years, there is a pandemic. The last one was the Spanish flu of 1918. So we were clearly overdue. And now, kind of like clockwork, here is the big pandemic.
So it is a little bit ironic that it is almost exactly 100 years after the Spanish flu. And I think the number is, what was it, 150 million people or something like that were killed by the Spanish flu. Like it was an astounding number of people. And it was the first example of the impact of globalization, or what it was people coming back from trench warfare in Europe, all the army combatants that transferred the virus back to other home countries. And, you think about, how we didn't have airplanes, we didn't have worldwide business travel in 1919. We had a whole bunch of army combatants that were being shipped home by ships. And that still spread to 150 million people. And I think about what would happen today. Like it's just.
Yeah, it's pretty staggering. I think the advantage we have now is we have things like ventilators. we have hospitals, and we also have antibiotics that can treat the secondary infections from when people get infected with this COVID-19 virus.
Well, why don't we take a break and then maybe talk about some of those other things? Okay, so let's take a break and come back with more with the doctor in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Paul Lem, the CEO of Spartan BioScience. And, I'm a little bit concerned. And at the same time, I'm excited because I'm concerned because the doctor has gone through a lot of statistics that he obviously studies as an infectious disease expert and has been calling, I think you're calling into question this 100 to 200,000 deaths in the United States. That would translate into 10,000 to 20,000 if you extrapolated sort of the 10% number into Canada. And you were suggesting that might be in the millions in the United States, which would suggest it's not 10,000 in Canada, but could be 100,000 or so in Canada. So, I'm I'm very concerned with that. You're talking about how testing is so critically important, and clearly you're working very hard on getting a portable DNA test to the market and get approved. And I think that's fantastic, and I congratulate you for that and thank you for that. But you also said you're worried about the economy.
I'm very worried, Brian. I mean, I walk around my neighborhood, everything is shut down, whether it's like restaurants, businesses, both big businesses and small businesses. I'm worried if this goes on for another month or two, how many businesses will be left?
It's a big concern. I agree. Layoffs here, there, and everywhere. What do you think the solution is?
That's such a great question. I think you look what the Europeans are doing, what the Americans are doing, where they're actually thinking that basically the economy is just frozen. There's all these businesses that are profitable and viable as long as we can get to the other side of this COVID-19 pandemic. So let's subsidize 75% of people's wages for as long as it takes for the social distancing to kick in and for us to control the pandemic. So that might be the right way.
But companies, even when they're getting 75%, and it's 75% of a wage up to a set dollar figure, so it's not for what people make, are still laying people off. Air Canada laid off, 15,000 people, and you're still getting layoffs here, there, and everywhere. And people, we got record unemployment registration for unemployment insurance. They're talking about, we're in a recession in the first quarter. We're undoubtedly in a recession in the second quarter. It's going to be a double-digit decline in GDP for those 2 quarters. So even if you do have a recovery come summer, fall, there's going to be a huge economic collapse. And so many people live paycheck to paycheck, and so many businesses don't have the income to pay the rent. And I just wonder what's going to happen to the real estate market, what's going to happen to the office market, what's going to happen to the leasing market for restaurants and little boutiques and malls in Ottawa and Toronto. What's going to happen to people's net worth if not only their RSPs go down and their portfolios go down, but their house prices go down, which we haven't seen as of yet. But in every other recession, it comes eventually.
I agree with you, Brian. I am very, very concerned. It's like you're saying, from both big companies, small companies, to individuals, it's affecting people's retirement savings. And for big companies, I know Canada, we are very dependent on our resources. I think it's the price of Canadian oil is something down to $4 to $5 per barrel, which that's going to devastate the whole oil and gas industry in Canada. And then what happens mining, or like you said, airlines? I am very concerned about this.
That said, it was interesting. Jeff Bezos, Amazon, sent out a letter that you probably heard about, which was saying, let's think about how we can actually reinvent our business for the new normal. And we have to, for at least think about for the next couple of months, COVID-19 and stay at home being the new normal. And so clearly, Amazon's got a great opportunity in that regard in getting products to people's homes. And you have done the exact same thing. You've reinvented your business. You've come up with a product that people are desperately interested in wanting. And hopefully you're going to hopefully you're going to get Health Canada approval. Hopefully you're going to save a lot of people's lives because you're going to be doing the testing, and hopefully you're going to make some money out of that. I think more companies need to be thinking about that, whether it's making masks or making it equipment or making solutions to people's media needs when they're doing all this work from home. There's got to be people that are giving a lot of thought. There should be a lot of people giving a lot of thought to how you actually can make business, both for social reasons like your test, but also for business reasons like your test and your business are going to do. So I think that's the challenge, is stop waiting for it to be over. Think about how you can actually do business in today's environment, because it's going to last for a while.
I think that's a great point you're raising, Brian. I think humans as a species, we've shown we're very adaptable. So once something becomes a new normal, there's always a period of shock and adjustment at the beginning, but then we do find a way.
Well, I wish you and your product great success. I'm looking forward to it getting approved. I got to tell you that I was at a conference in the United States a couple of weeks ago where there were a couple of people that were tested positive. And so I was told to socially isolate and self-isolate, so I did. But I was told by several different doctors, don't bother going to get tested because it'll take too long to get the test results and you risk yourself of infection if you go and actually get tested. So just go home and get better. And so that's what I did. And so I wish I had had your product available so I'd know whether I actually had this stupid thing or not.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, good luck. Keep in touch. Well, that's Brian Crombie for the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I got to say that Dr. Paul Lamb, CEO of Spartan BioScience, and his portable DNA test unit is something that we need. And so Health Canada, hurry up and approve it. And Premier Ford, Prime Minister Trudeau, et cetera, order this product from this man because we need those tests. Thank you all for staying with us. Good night.